Hello, this is Julian with Coffee Reviews, and today we will be reacting to Food and Wine Magazine's The Best Coffee Roaster in Every State list. So we did the same thing for their Best Coffee Shop in Every State list, and as a result, we had a lot of people asking if we were going to react to this article as well. And with one exception, which is the state of Washington, which is arguably the most important state for me. My friend Greg ruined that for me, so I have no idea what else is on this list, with the exception of Washington. So I'm really curious to see what's on here, so let's go ahead and start, as I imagine this is probably going to be another pretty long video. And first up will be Alabama. And my pick for Alabama would actually be Seeds, because even though I picked Revelator for my favorite coffee shop, I actually like Seeds coffee in general better. I just had a really good experience with Revelator's coffee shop. And they picked domestic, which is interesting to me because it does show that they can use the same coffee roaster as the same coffee shop. But I've still never had anything from domestic, so I can't really comment on that. Let's continue with Alaska. And again, with Alaska, I have never had any coffee from them, so we'll just see what they have. Genesis Coffee Lab. Never been to Alaska, never had any Alaskan coffee roaster, so we'll quickly continue. And next up, we have Arizona. In Arizona, my pick is probably going to be something like Press. However, I don't imagine that that's necessarily what they're going to go with, and they go with Pear Cup Works. I've never had Pear Cup Works. I've heard a lot of positive things about both them and Presta. I imagined those were going to be the two that they picked from this list, but Pear Cup Works, yeah, they're a coffee roaster I've heard a lot about, just never tried. So we will move past that. And Arkansas, and I already spoiled it for myself, it's Onyx Coffee Lab, but truth be told, I fully expected it to be Onyx Coffee Lab. While there are some underrated coffee roasters in the state of Arkansas, including Arcegus and Airship, Onyx Coffee Lab is just a monster in the coffee world, and there was no question that they were going to take home the top honors in this. All right, let's keep going. And next up, we have California. And California is going to be extremely interesting to me because I have a couple of coffee roasters that I think it could be. My favorite coffee roaster is Verve, and they might have a chance at taking home first place, but what else is good out there? I like 4Barrel out of San Francisco, Chromatic out of San Jose, Temple out of Sacramento, Kenyon out of Los Angeles. So there, I listed a place from every part of California, so they don't feel excluded. Let's see what they have. And they picked Cat and Cloud, and that's an interesting one. So Cat and Cloud obviously spun off from Verve. Not one of my favorites from California. Their coffee tends to be a slight bit more developed than I like, but I have heard a lot of people really do enjoy Cat and Cloud, so I could imagine worse picks, we'll say. So that's an okay pick for me. All right, let's keep going. Colorado. And there's only one winner, and it's Sweet Bloom. Corvus and Huckleberry are both pretty decent coffee roasters. Harbinger up north and Switchback down south. But yeah, Sweet Bloom, perfect. Sweet Bloom kind of stands head and shoulders above the rest in terms of the best coffee roaster in Colorado for me. A lot of familiarity with them. A lot of reviews on this channel of Sweet Bloom's coffees. All right, next up we have Connecticut. In Connecticut, my pick has to be Ilse. And even though I'm not the most knowledgeable person on Ilse's coffees, I've only had 3 coffees from them ever, 2 full bag reviews, so I can't think of any other coffee roaster out of Connecticut, and Ilse's up there. And I think I do want to review more Ilse's coffees because they are very strong in terms of flavor. They have a very fun flavor profile to their coffees. So hopefully in the future we get more Ilse's coffees, and let's continue. And Delaware, I feel like the only answer has to be Brandywine, and of course it is Brandywine. I don't even know of any other coffee roasters out in Delaware, but very experimental, interesting coffee roaster in general. All right, Florida. I picked Panther originally. That's probably still my pick. I think let's scroll down. Let's see here. Resident Coffee. I have no familiarity with Resident. I've never even heard of them. Are they out of Gainesville? Oh, they are out of Gainesville. Nice looking bags, truth be told. All right, maybe in the future, we'll see. All right, next up we have Georgia, and I think I picked East Pole originally. I can't think of any other coffee roasters in Georgia that I really like. Portrait, that's interesting. I've never had Portrait's coffees. Are they out of Savannah, right? No, they are out of Atlanta. Have I been to Portrait's coffee shop? Do they have a coffee shop? I feel like I've had their coffee before. I just don't remember, but I definitely have heard of them. I don't have too much familiarity in the sense that I don't remember exactly trying their coffee. So we'll continue. Hawaii, another state that I've never had coffee from, Big Island Coffee Roasters. I feel like that was the same pick they went with. Oh no, they went with Kona for their coffee shop. Okay, no familiarity with them, so we'll continue. And next up we have Idaho. I can't think of any Idaho coffee roasters that I know of. Is that Necker Coffee? Necker Coffee? All right, no familiarity with them, never even heard of them going into this. I know I've been to Idaho a couple of times, and yeah, it doesn't even ring a bell. So we'll continue. Illinois. Oh, this is going to get tricky. So we have to think Chicago. What would I pick for my favorite Illinois coffee roaster? This is really hard. I honestly don't have an answer. Because obviously the ones that are coming to mind quickly are Intelligentsia. And back in the day, I liked, what is it called? Boutros? But that is no longer a coffee roaster, so Metric. Okay. I've heard a lot about Metric. I know I've been to their coffee shop. It just isn't, too familiar for me. So, yeah, I guess we'll continue. That's probably a pretty decent pick. I mean, I've heard so many positive things about Metric, but I just don't particularly remember. All right, Indiana. I don't have a favorite from Indiana. Tinker Coffee Co. I believe I've had a friend go to Tinker and say some pretty positive things, but wouldn't be the expert on Indiana. Same thing with Iowa. I don't have a favorite pick from Iowa, and it's Windmill Coffee. So we'll continue. As mentioned, I want to keep this as short as possible this time. Kansas. Okay, Kansas, and I feel like still most of the better Kansas City coffee roasters are on the east side, which would indicate Missouri. So for Kansas, my pick is still probably PT's. And they went with PT's this time. Okay, good. So I did pick a coffee shop based out of Wichita, I believe. And PT's was a really nice coffee shop for me as well. But they're a pretty quality coffee roaster in general. They have some really nice offerings. So I will definitely agree with PT's there. All right, let's keep going. Kentucky, and I believe I picked Quills for last time, and they went with Quills as well this time, so both Best Coffee Shop and Best Coffee Roaster. I actually don't know of any other coffee roasters out in Kentucky, so that one works for me. All right, let's continue, and Louisiana. Even though I spent a bit of time in New Orleans, I don't remember any coffee roasters, Exile coffee roasters. What I do remember from New Orleans coffee was anything outside of one of the multi-roasters was typically a little on the darker side. So maybe they've changed things, but I have no familiarity with Exile and I've never heard of them. So we'll continue. Maine, Tandem is my pick again, and Tandem is what they went with. So Best Coffee Shop and Best Coffee Roaster for me in both of those. So we will move on. And Maryland. Okay, and this time I'm going with Ceremony again. I went with Ceremony for the Best Coffee Shop, and they went with a different coffee roaster. And this time they went with Ceremony for the Best Coffee Roaster. I quite like Ceremony's coffees, and they're an important coffee roaster to me, as they did kind of give Sweet Bloom its start in a sense. So I 100% agree with that. All right, let's continue. Massachusetts. Okay, and I picked George Howell from Massachusetts for Best Coffee Shop, but when it comes to Best Coffee Roaster, and this might be a surprise to some people, I'm actually going to pick Little Wolf, because I've never necessarily been the biggest fan of George Howell's coffees. I just really liked their shop, and I had never been to a Little Wolf shop, even though I wanted to go up there. So they picked the Little Wolf, and I will agree with that, because I think just from the couple of bags of Little Wolf's coffees I've had, they may not have been the most outstanding thing, but they were quality in general. So I will agree with that pick right there. All right, let's continue. Michigan. And I'm hoping that they remedy the situation this time, because Madcap had to be the pick for Michigan, and Madcap still has to be the pick, Best Coffee Roaster, and it is Madcap. Okay, good. I was frustrated with their coffee shop pick just because of how much I enjoy Madcap, and Madcap wins their Best Coffee Roaster. So I agree with that. They're such nice looking shops. Look at that photo. All right, let's continue. Minnesota. And for Minnesota, originally I picked Dogwood, and they picked Wesley Andrews. But Spy House is also a pretty decent one, so there are some decent coffee roasters out in Minnesota, and they picked Dogwood. That's what's kind of interesting, is they're agreeing with me a lot more on the coffee roasters this time around than they were with the coffee shops. But yeah, Dogwood is one of my favorites. I liked their old bag designs. I kind of really don't like the new ones. So, but I have a lot of memories of Dogwood. They were the first coffee roaster I ever went to when I was in Minnesota. All right, Mississippi, and I don't have a pick, and they went with Bean Fruit Coffee. Yeah, I've never had a coffee in Minnesota, so wouldn't have an opinion on that. Missouri, and I believe I went with Blueprint for Missouri. Even though there are some really good coffee shops on the east side in Kansas City, there are so many coffee shops that they could, coffee roasters that they could pick from, and they picked Monarch. And there was actually a conversation in our comments recently about Monarch versus the other coffee roaster is spacing me right now. But I can't think of the other coffee roaster right now. I've had Monarch's coffees. They feel a little more developed than I like, and Blueprint was quite nice. I wish I could remember the Oddly Correct. That's the name of the other coffee roaster. And I liked Oddly Correct. Difference of opinion, I suppose, but Monarch seems to be up and coming. I've found their coffees in a lot of coffee shops around the country, actually, so we'll see. And next up, we have Montana. I don't have a pick for Montana. Revel Coffee. And I always wonder what the roast profile for a coffee roaster in a place like Montana is. But yeah, we'll continue. Nebraska, I picked Archetype originally, and Archetype has to be the answer, and Archetype is the answer. Even though it's the only Nebraskan coffee roaster I think I have familiarity with, I think that they're a really quality coffee roaster in general, so I completely agree with that pick. Let's continue. Nevada. And I've discussed this with people. I don't have a favorite in Nevada because Nevada's kind of a hard state for me to drink coffee in. I haven't necessarily liked anything. Luminous coffee. Okay, I've heard so much about Luminous, and I've seen a lot of higher end multi-roasters carrying Luminous's coffee. So I really want to try their coffee at some point if I get the opportunity. I've found their coffee shop in stores their coffee in stores before, just never picked it up or purchased it. So might be fun. We'll see. Might be pretty good. Next up, we have New Hampshire. And I don't think I have a favorite coffee roaster out of New Hampshire. La Mulita Coffee. Okay, never heard of them. So I've spent very little time in New Hampshire, mostly just driven through it. Don't have an opinion on that, so we'll continue. New Jersey. And a lot of people were talking about Mod Cup. And Mod Cup has reached out to us and want us to review another one of their coffees. So hopefully we'll be able to do that soon. And the one experience I had with Mod Cup wasn't necessarily my favorite. So Royal Mile, which is interesting because I believe they were on our very first video. We just never reviewed them because I had never heard of them. And I didn't even know if they were still active. But yeah, Royal Mile. Maybe at some point we have to do that one. All right, New Mexico. And they have a slow burn coffee. Never been there. Never even heard of it. So don't have an opinion on that. Never actually stopped in New Mexico for coffee, even though I've been to New Mexico a number of times. All right, New York. My pick again is going to be Say. I really like Say. They may be inconsistent in how good their coffees are sometimes, but Say, yeah, easiest pick, one of the easiest picks for me on this list. North Carolina, and I ruined it for me, Black and White Coffee. We said in the shop video that Black and White Coffee would have been one of my picks, but I think when I really think about it, Hex might actually be my top pick for North Carolina in general. I'm kind of happy that they didn't go with Counterculture because even though Counterculture is really iconic, it's not quite as modern as a place like Hex or Black and White. So I'm okay with the Black and White pick. Yeah, I'm okay with that pick. Let's continue. And North Dakota, and they misspelled Dakota, but I don't have a pick for North Dakota Youngblood Coffee. I've never been to North Dakota and never had any coffee from North Dakota. Ohio. And I heard that they went with an interesting pick for Ohio, so let's see what they have. Flatlands Coffee. I like one-lines coffees. So the two that I have reviewed, if the second review is up at this point, they're pretty good. So I would have gone with one line specifically, but they went with Flatlands. I've never had Flatlands and never heard of Flatlands. So we will continue. Nordic style. They say they roast Nordic style. Interesting. All right, Oklahoma. And again, this is fun because Oklahoma has so many. They have Killer actually is probably going to be my pick, but Circa's pretty decent, and Elemental was the name of the coffee shop that I was trying to think of last time, was also pretty decent, and they went with Clarity Coffee Co. So I went back and I looked after that video and saw that Clarity Coffee Co. does carry Killer's coffees. At least it did when I was there, but it looks like they might have started roasting their own, if that's the case. So that's interesting. We'll continue on past that. I wonder if their coffee is better than Killer's, because Killer's coffee was pretty good in the previous experiences I'd had. Oregon, this is one of the really big ones for me. My pick still remains Roseline, but I'm okay with a number of places, including Hart and Cova. Let's see what they have. Noble Coffee, that is an interesting choice. I have never had Noble's coffee. Noble Coffee's coffee. The bags don't even look that familiar. That is an interesting choice. I'll have to try their coffee. I mean, if it is better than all those amazing coffee roasters out in Portland, then that's just an interesting pick. All right, Pennsylvania. My pick still remains Passenger. And there's some really good coffee roasters in the state of Pennsylvania as a whole, but Passenger is just head and shoulders above the rest. And it is Passenger, not surprising. People love Passenger. I love Passenger. One of my 5 favorite coffee roasters in the world. Easy pick for the state of Pennsylvania. I feel like I kind of want to give shout outs to some other places just because I know Zach's probably watching this video. So definitely want to give a shout out to Blind Tiger Coffee because one of the coffees I had was really nice. So shout out to Blind Tiger. Rhode Island, Bolt's. I'm going to go with Bolt because I remembered that I had actually reviewed one of Bolt's coffees and I really liked it, especially for a Kenyan coffee. So Bolt is up there. Yes, completely agree with that. And I can't believe I had spaced that Bolt was based out of Rhode Island, but I also like their marketing too. Let's continue. and South Carolina. And this will be interesting. As I mentioned before, Second State is actually my favorite. Methodical is probably the one that they went with on here. Both are pretty decent, pretty quality. Let's see what they have. Methodical is the pick. I'm not surprised that that's the pick that they went with. I really like Second State's coffees. I've had mixed impressions of Methodical's coffees as a whole, but I do like them for the most part, so I'm okay with that pick. Let's continue, and we have South Dakota. Don't have a pick for South Dakota. They have Kofea Roastery. Don't have any familiarity with South Dakotan coffee, so we will continue. And next we have Tennessee, and Tennessee will be interesting. So Bison Virtue, I believe, was their pick for coffee shop. Do I have a favorite coffee roaster out of Tennessee? Steadfast back in the day was pretty decent, and I believe that they've spun off since to a different coffee roaster. Crema. Okay, that's fine. I have not necessarily been the biggest fan of Crema's coffees. I've had them a couple of times. Every time I go out to Nashville, I go to their coffee shop, and it's a nice coffee shop. I just haven't necessarily loved the coffee in general, so that pick is what it is. I don't necessarily have a significantly better pick than that. Texas, and a lot of people messaged me or said in the comments that Blendon is the best coffee roaster out of Texas, best coffee shop too. And I still don't have a better pick. Evocation back in the day was a really, really good coffee roaster, and I'm kind of upset that it no longer exists. And they went with Three Keys Coffee, and it looks like it's based out of Houston. And I have not been to Houston in a very long time, but yeah, it's an interesting pick. I don't have a better pick myself, so we'll continue. Utah, and I finally remembered towards the end of talking about Utah that La Barba was my pick, but let's see what they have. I know La Barba is just a slight bit more developed than I like. Public. I've been to Public a lot, and the story I always like to tell about Public is that they were pushing their toast on me a lot the first time I went, but their coffee's fine. I think Salt Lake City actually has a little bit of an underrated local scene than people might imagine, given that it is Salt Lake City, but yeah, Public's one of the ones I went to. It's okay. I don't think I necessarily have a better pick than that. And Vermont, I can't think of any coffee roasters. Vivid Coffee, yeah, never heard of them, never tried them. So we will continue. Virginia, I picked Blanchard's when I finally saw Blanchard's on the list. Blanchard's would be my pick this time as well because I really liked my experience with Blanchard's. Completely agree with that. They're one of the better coffee roasters in Virginia. And let's continue. And Washington. And this one was spoiled for me, but at least I get to talk about Washington because this is my state again. So the best coffee roasters in the state of Washington are Canberra, which they picked, and Olympia. And some underrated ones include Bluebeard. And those are probably above the rest. I think that maybe Washington has a little bit of an overrated coffee scene in general, that being, of course, somebody that lives in the state of Washington. And Canberra was their pick, as mentioned. I already knew that. Canberra's pretty good. And Olympia are both pretty good. And we've reviewed a couple of both of their coffees on this channel, and I have a hard time differentiating which one I necessarily like more. Kind of depends on the mood, but for the most part, those are the two best coffee roasters in the state of Washington, and I'm fine with either. It's funny that neither of those are based out of Seattle. Both are either pretty far north or pretty far south of Seattle itself. All right, Washington, D.C. And Small Plains would be my pick. And they picked Lost Sock Roasters, but I've never had Lost Sock Roasters. And I've only had a couple of cups of Small Plains coffees. So I think, yeah, I don't have a better pick than that, with the exception of that Small Plains. West Virginia, I've never had coffee in West Virginia. They picked Quantum Bean Coffee, so don't have an opinion on that. We will continue. And Wisconsin. Wisconsin, I believe I picked... I gave 3 places, but I still think my favorite coffee roaster is JBC, just because of how much familiarity and how long of a history I have with JBC's coffees. So let's see if they went with JBC. And they went with Ruby again, and I'm fine with that. I really appreciate that Ruby's unapologetic about its medium roast profile, and for that reason, I think that they do a really good job of the way they do their coffee. So I'm fine with that pick. Even if JBC is just my first choice. There are some nice coffee roasters out in the state of Wisconsin. And then again, Wyoming, I don't have a pick. Overview Coffee. So that's the end of the list, and that's kind of my reaction to the list. So I think this is a better list than their best coffee shops list. I think this one may be a little bit easier to judge for them, given that coffee roasters are a little bit more specific than coffee shops. There are so many more coffee shops than coffee roasters in most states. But I would love to hear your guys' feedback. If you agree with me on any of these, then feel free to let me know. If you also disagree with me or strongly disagree with something on this list, obviously we're all an expert in our own local coffee scenes, and I have familiarity with a lot of local coffee scenes, having spent so much time in certain places like obviously Washington, Colorado, and Oregon. So as a result, those were my picks, and I'm pretty firm and confident in my picks of those in general, but I'd love to hear your picks, as I know somebody maybe from Texas or somebody maybe from Ohio knows their coffee scene better than I will know it, as well as probably the people that created this list know it. So if you disagree with their list, I'd love to know what your pick would have been instead, as coffee roasters are a lot more specific as opposed to coffee shops. I think that one can be a little bit more objective in a sense than maybe a more subjective list like a coffee shop list. But for the most part, I'll leave this review at that. Or I guess this reaction at that. If you guys do enjoy these reaction videos, and give this one a like and let me know. And let me know if you want me to do more reaction videos in the future, as they are also pretty fun to do. I really enjoy kind of seeing what a place like Food and Wine picks for their best coffee shop, as well as what you guys think on this list as well. If you enjoy the content in general, give this video a like, subscribe if you're not already subscribed. This right here has been a reaction to Food and Wine's the best coffee roaster in every state. I'm going to say coffee shop a lot. Best coffee roaster in every state list. Thank you for watching.